Weymouth during the raids. 450 years ago, Melcombe Regis was amalgamated with Weymouth, and the town we now know as Weymouth was born, situated on the south coast of England, approximately halfway between Portsmouth and Exeter. Weymouth is famous for its beautiful beach, sandcastles, ice cream, fish and chips, and Punch and Judy. It was also the place where the first confirmed case of the Black Death was reported in 1348. Later, in 1635, 100 local people made the journey to America, aboard the Charity, eventually settling in Weymouth, Massachusetts, not far from where the Mayflower landed 15 years earlier.
The beach in those days was the best sand in the country. Very, very fine, lovely sand. And we used to have the sand maker on the sands, building churches and different things. And used to get lots of people gathering to see this happen. And I ended up as a donkey boy on the beach. I used to go and collect the donkeys in the early mornings, lead them down onto the beach to start work, and I used to get 6 a week for being a donkey boy, and then take them back at night back to their quarters.
Things were so much safer in those days, and you know, because my brother and sister are only 3.5 years older than me, and so my mother let them take me down, and I was obviously under 5, and you know, and to look after me and go and play on the sands. But I never went on the pebbles. It was always on the sands because it was closer to Chapley anyway, and so that's where I used to go. It was lovely on the sands. We had donkeys.
This is a funny thing, really. We used to dive off the steps and the promenade railings down near the pavilion, where we used to dive for money. People used to always throw in a shilling piece or a 2p piece, and there used to be about 14 of us in a gang, and we all used to dive in to get to the bottom quickly to pick the money up. And of course, what used to happen, we used to start fighting underwater and stirring the sand and that up, and used to have bloodshot eyes with the sand and that. So I thought one day, I've got to get over this. So I said to my mother at home, I said, do you think you could sew a little pocket in my trunks with a zip on it? I said, so when I dive and go down and grab any money, I can put it in the zip and zip it up, and then nobody can get it out my hands. So this is what I used to do. And it used to be quite a big laugh, this did.
Before the war, the beach was an area where people congregated, people came on holiday, they had pedalos, donkey rides. With the possibility of invasion, that situation changed and tank traps were put down, barbed wire on the beach, and Weymouth became a naval port. There were numerous ships coming over with refugees from Belgium and France, and it became a completely restricted area, so you were very careful where you went.
War came to Weymouth when its reputation as a popular seaside holiday destination was at its height. On August the 9th, 1939, the fleet was assembled in Weymouth Harbour for an inspection by King George VI, whose namesake King George III had helped popularise the town in the late 1700s. 42 of the ships on display were later lost in enemy action, including the aircraft carrier Courageous, which was destroyed less than 6 weeks after being inspected by the King. Even before the first assault on Weymouth in June 1940, residents were encouraged to form a refuge against air attack. Des Fry, who lived in Weymouth during the war, described the precautions that were taken against the air raids, including strengthening the cupboard under the stairs with large balks of timber. Another precaution was to tape all the windows with masking tape to prevent shattered glass from flying everywhere.
My first memories of the air raid was actually, I was in Holy Trinity School at the time, and the sirens went off, and there was lots of banging and everything going on, and the teacher looked so frightened. The children gathered around the teacher, and her face was so terrified. I've never seen anyone look so frightened in all my life. And I wasn't hugging round her because my mother gave me a bracelet, and she told me that I'd be safe with that on. So when I heard all the banging and going, I thought, well, I'm all right, I'm safe, you know, nothing's going to happen to me. And so I thought, well, I better tell the teacher, and so she wouldn't be so frightened. So I managed to pull some of the children out of the way and to get to the teacher. And when I told her, she didn't look any different. You know, I was quite surprised because I said, you know, we're quite safe. I got my bracelet on.
Groves's Brewery, just opposite Devonish's Brewery, used to have a cellar 4 foot off the main floor, like a 4 foot drop, where they used to back the lorries in and drop the beer barrels into the cellar for coolness. And they turned that into a shelter. Well, my mother, when the siren used to go, used to catch hold of my hand and used to run so fast I couldn't keep up with her, and I was like flying through the air. She was pulling me on to get in the shelter so quick. And on this particular day, we were in this shelter, a lot of people, and 2 bombs dropped actually in the Hope Square, which was only about, what, 20 foot away from where we were down in this little alcove. And the blast was unbelievable. The whole massive big wooden doors had big iron bars to keep them closed, and the blast blew the lot right in. And I can remember one man shouting, "Dive!" That's all I can remember. And everybody dived, and the blast went across the top of us like a whirlwind. It was an awful feeling. And when it all settled, the doors was all blown away. You could look straight out. There was a gentleman fixed across against the wall, blown with the blast against the wall, couldn't get off. And he was there for ages before anybody could go and save him. And it was an awful feeling. Everybody was crying and shouting.
When it was all clear, someone came into the school and he picked me up and he carried me, because my house was opposite the school playground, and so he carried me to my house. And when we got out, the road was all full of telegraph wires. There were wires everywhere, and I remember thinking I wouldn't have been able to walk home because I wouldn't have got through all those wires. And when I got into the house, one of my brothers was there, and he asked me if I wanted a piece of fruit. And all the windows are blown in, and when I looked at the fruit bowl, it was just studded with glass in the apples. You know, it was a real surreal thing, and I've still got that image in my mind.
Anderson shelters were distributed in earnest in 1940. However, not everyone in the borough had a garden, so communal shelters were set up, including in the crypt beneath Holy Trinity.
One of my brothers, whenever the sirens went, he used to race down Chapel steps and go into the crypt at Holy Trinity Church. He felt that that was the safest place to go, apparently.
Holy Trinity Church has a huge crypt. Originally it was a burial place, a place of peace, and a place where people used to come to be near their loved ones. And it was actually quite fitting that during the war years, when outside there was, you know, bombs going off all around, that the community were encouraged to come to the crypt, always been seen as a place of peace, to escape from the horrors that were going on outside. And young people came because they were not only escaping the bombings, but also it was exciting for them, and they used to sit on the tombs, and it would be a great meeting place for young people.
Nowadays it's kind of impossible to really understand how important a church was to a community back then. So it wouldn't have been as alien to them entering the crypt as it would be for us nowadays. So to them, they had the church above them, which was, even in normal times, a place of sanctuary and reflection. And so it would have been perfectly natural for them to take refuge in there during the darkest times of most of their lives.
On September the 4th, 1939, the day after war was declared, 4,000 evacuees arrived in Dorset. Host families received 8 shillings and 6pence a head. 4 boys from Plaistow Secondary School, evacuated to Weymouth, joined Holy Trinity Choir in the first month of the war and were made most welcome.
The evacuees did come down from Waterloo on a train down to Weymouth station, and they were marched up to this house at Buxton Road, and that was called Stormont House. And they were there for years, all our school days. I mean, they left their families, and it was so sad. But they mingled in at school very well. They settled down tremendous. But I wouldn't have liked to have been in their position, I wouldn't at all. I mean, it's nothing like being with your parents in bad times, is it? And I felt very, very sorry for them.
Parish activities carried on despite the threat of air raids, which increased following the evacuation of Dunkirk in June 1940.
Dunkirk was the evacuation of the British Army from Europe in the advance of the German troops. Weymouth's role in Dunkirk was a receiving point for refugees, and also the 2 Channel Islands steamers, St Helier and St Julian, went over there and brought back many thousands of troops and refugees.
A third of the 330,000 soldiers rescued from the beaches were French, and 6,000 of these, from Flanders, were sent to Weymouth. According to parish historian Ivor Morgan, Holy Trinity, and indeed the whole of Weymouth, spent that summer giving succour and help to the forces as they landed in the town before being dispersed to training camps for regrouping and re-equipping into fighting units. As the raiders returned to Germany, many spare bombs were dropped on Portland, as its unusual geography made it easy prey for German bombers.
There are a number of theories as to why Chapel Hay was bombed. It could have been they had attempted to bomb Portland Harbour, which of course was a strategic part of the war effort, or it could have been that they were attempting to bomb the town bridge, which was a strategic line of communication between Weymouth and Portland. It put pay to that centre core of Chapel Hay as a residential area, and people moved out to various places in the borough.
Chapel Hay was situated between Whitehead's torpedo factory and Brewer's Quay, formerly Devonish Brewery, which from the air looked like a munitions factory. Subsequently, the area around Holy Trinity Church suffered more than any other in the whole of Weymouth and Portland.